Some say justice is blind, but in Oakwood, justice simply closed its eyes. For 30 years, the truth has been buried beneath paperwork and protocol sealed away by those who wear badges meant to protect. A system designed not to serve, but to shield its power, its darkest secrets. They never thought she would return. They never imagined that the little girl who watched her father die on these streets would come back wearing a badge of her own. But wounds left unhealed fester. Silence, when enforced long enough, eventually shatters. Today in this town where evidence disappears and cameras conveniently malfunction, a reckoning arrives. Not with gunfire or vengeance, but with something far more dangerous. A mirror held up to reflect what no one wants to see. And once you've looked into that mirror, there's no turning away from the truth it reveals. The summer heat pressed down on Oakwood like an invisible weight. Through the haze, 9-year-old Gabrielle Morgan skipped along the cracked sidewalk, her small hand gripping her father's calloused fingers. Ethan Morgan's laughter rumbled deep in his chest as they made their way home from Pearson's grocery plastic bags, swinging between them. "What do you think Mama will say about the ice cream?" Gabrielle asked, her eyes bright with conspiracy. "That's between us, Gabby." Ethan winked, squeezing her hand. "Our little secret." The police cruiser appeared suddenly, tires screeching against asphalt. Two officers emerged with weapons drawn. Gabrielle felt her father stiffen beside her. "Hands where I can see them." The command cut through the muggy air. Ethan slowly raised one hand, the other still holding grocery bags. "Officers, I'm just walking my daughter home." The first shot echoed down the street like thunder. Gabrielle watched her father's expression shift from confusion to shock as he crumpled to his knees. The grocery bags hit the ground, cartons of milk bursting open, mingling with spreading crimson beneath him. "Daddy." Her voice sounded small even to herself. The second shot came as Ethan reached toward his daughter. His body fell backward. Grocery items scattered around him like forgotten artifacts. A box of Lucky Charms. A carton of eggs cracked and oozing. A pint of chocolate ice cream melting in the heat. Gabrielle stood frozen, watching red bloom across her father's white shirt. One of the officers approached, holstering his weapon. She couldn't hear what he was saying. Everything had gone silent, except for the pounding of her own heartbeat. Later in the sterile hallway of the police station, Gabrielle sat motionless on a hard plastic chair. Officers walked past without meeting her eyes. Through the glass partition, she could see men in suits speaking to her mother, whose face remained stone still, except for the tears carving silent paths down her cheeks. "Technical malfunction," she overheard someone say. "Camera didn't capture it. Thought he had a weapon. Quick closure is best for everyone." 3 days after the funeral, Gabrielle's mother sat beside her on the bed. In her hands was a plastic evidence bag containing a piece of blood-stained shirt fabric. "The system will try to make you forget," her mother said, voice steady, despite the tremble in her hands. "They'll tell you there was nothing to see, that your eyes lied to you." She pressed the bag into Gabrielle's small hands. "If I'm not here to tell it, you tell what happened. You tell the truth." Gabrielle clutched the fabric, feeling its stiffness between her fingers. "I will, Mama. They can take a life, but they can't take the truth unless we give it to them." That night, Gabrielle dreamed of her father's blood spreading across the sidewalk, becoming a mirror in which she saw her own reflection, mouth open in a silent scream. The morning sun glinted off the bronze plaque outside Oakwood Police Department as Gabrielle Morgan stood before it, briefcase in one hand, badge in the other. 30 years had passed since she'd left this town, with nothing but a blood-stained scrap of fabric and the weight of an unspoken promise. Now she was returning as Chief Morgan. Few in the department knew her face. Her career path had taken her through the FBI, then the Department of Justice, working cases far from the spotlight. Her appointment had come as a surprise to most, an outsider chosen over established candidates. The press release had featured only a formal headshot and an impressive resume. Nothing about her connection to Oakwood, nothing about her father. Gabrielle straightened her tailored suit jacket, tucked away the badge, and pushed through the glass doors. The lobby fell silent as she entered, conversations dropping to whispers. She nodded to the receptionist, who fumbled with papers, clearly unprepared for her early arrival. "Chief Morgan," the receptionist managed, "we weren't expecting you until the ceremony tomorrow." "I prefer to arrive without fanfare," Gabrielle replied, her voice measured and smooth. "Is my office ready?" "Yes, ma'am. Third floor, end of the hall." Gabrielle made her way through the building, aware of the eyes following her movement. She cataloged the reactions. Curiosity from some, open hostility from others. The department was divided just as her research had indicated. The old guard clung to power while younger officers pushed for change. Between them lay a chasm of silence about practices everyone knew existed, but no one dared name. Her office was spacious but impersonal. A desk, computer, standard-issue chair. The walls had been freshly painted, erasing any trace of the previous occupant. Through the glass walls, she could see officers gathering in small clusters, casting glances her way. A knock at the door frame drew her attention. A broad-shouldered white man with a weathered face and thinning hair stood there, arms crossed. "Victor Reynolds," he said without waiting for acknowledgement. "Been running patrol for 20 years. Gabrielle nodded. "Officer Reynolds, I've reviewed your file." "Lieutenant Reynolds," he corrected, the corner of his mouth twitching. "I've been meaning to ask who you know that got you this appointment. Must be someone pretty high up." Gabrielle met his gaze, her expression unchanged. "My qualifications are in my file, Lieutenant. I suggest you review it." Reynolds chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Qualifications on paper don't mean much in Oakwood. This place has its own rules." "Rules are precisely what I'm here to address," Gabrielle replied, placing her briefcase on the desk. "The department briefing is at 9 tomorrow. I look forward to outlining my vision then." Reynolds lingered in the doorway, his presence filling the space. "Just so you know, chief, things work a certain way around here. People who try to change that usually don't last long." After he left, Gabrielle stood at the window, watching officers move through the parking lot below. Her reflection in the glass was superimposed over them, a ghost haunting a place that had taken everything from her. From her briefcase, she removed a small frame. Inside was the blood-stained fabric preserved behind glass. She placed it face down in the desk drawer. "I'm here, Daddy," she whispered to the empty room. The courthouse was older than most buildings in Oakwood, its limestone facade weathered by decades of summer storms and winter frosts. Gabrielle slipped into the back row of courtroom C wearing civilian clothes, dark slacks and a simple blouse. No badge, no insignia. Just another face in the sparse crowd attending the Monday morning arraignment proceedings. The case was familiar to her from the files she'd reviewed before accepting the position. Isaiah Carter, 16 years old, charged with resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. According to the police report, the teenager had become combative during a routine stop, resulting in injuries to both himself and the arresting officer. But something in the medical report had caught her attention, a broken collarbone inconsistent with the narrative. The courtroom doors opened and Victor Reynolds entered, his uniform pressed and badges gleaming. He nodded to the bailiff and took a seat near the front legs, spread wide, claiming space. 3 rows ahead, a woman sat alone, her back straight as steel. Sophia Carter, Isaiah's mother. Gabrielle had memorized her face from the case files. When Isaiah was led in, Gabrielle noted the sling supporting his right arm, the bruising still visible on his face. His eyes remained downcast as he shuffled to his place beside the public defender, a young woman clutching a file folder stuffed with loose papers. The proceedings began with mechanical efficiency. Charges read, "Please entered." The prosecutor, a man with silver-streaked hair and an expensive suit, recommended continued detention, citing the violent nature of the offense. The public defender began her counter-argument, voice trembling slightly. "Your Honor, my client has no prior record. The injuries he sustained during arrest are severe, requiring ongoing medical care that cannot be adequately provided in juvenile detention. His mother is prepared to—" "That boy attacked my officer," Reynolds interrupted, rising to his feet. "Broke his finger, nearly took his eye out." The judge frowned. "Lieutenant Reynolds, you'll have your turn to speak." "With respect, Your Honor, we've got a pattern with these kids. They resist, they fight, then they claim police brutality. It's a game to them." From her seat, Gabrielle observed the room's dynamics. The judge's resigned expression, the prosecutor's slight nod of agreement, the public defender's mounting frustration. When Sophia Carter abruptly stood, the entire courtroom shifted attention. "My son's collarbone was broken in 3 places," she said, voice unwavering. "He has internal bruising. He didn't fight anyone." "Mrs. Carter, please be seated," the judge warned. "This is the 3rd case this month with injuries like this." Sophia continued. All black or brown children, all with the same officers involved. That's enough. Reynolds turned, scanning the courtroom. His gaze locked on Gabrielle. Recognition flashed in his eyes. Not of who she was, but of a witness to something he didn't want seen. You, he pointed. Out. This is a closed hearing. Gabrielle remained seated. Public proceedings are open to the public officer. Reynolds moved toward her, hand on his belt. I said out. Now. I believe the judge determines who stays in his courtroom, Gabrielle replied evenly. Reynolds reached the back row, looming over her. You a reporter activist? We don't need your kind stirring up trouble. When Gabrielle didn't move, Reynolds grabbed her arm, fingers digging into flesh. I won't ask again. The collective intake of breath from the courtroom was audible as he pulled Gabrielle to her feet. From the corner of her eye, she saw a young girl no more than 12 holding up a phone recording. Lieutenant Reynolds? The judge's voice cracked like a whip. Release that woman immediately. Reynolds maintained his grip, a vein pulsing in his temple. Your Honor, we have protocols for disruptive individuals. The only disruption I see is coming from you, the judge replied. Release her. Now. Reynolds let go, his expression darkening as Gabrielle straightened her blouse with deliberate calm. Behind them, an officer approached the young girl with the phone. Delete that, he instructed. No recording in the courtroom. The girl looked to her grandmother beside her, who nodded reluctantly. The officer watched as she deleted the video, then returned to his post. What no one noticed was the elderly woman on the other side of the girl who had been recording on her own phone. As the courtroom settled, she slipped her device into her purse and caught the eye of the young public defender, giving an almost imperceptible nod. The judge cleared his throat. Now, if we can proceed without further interruption. Your Honor, the public defender interjected, a new confidence in her voice. I'd like to enter a motion to dismiss based on new evidence of procedural misconduct. Reynolds scoffed. What evidence? The judge sighed. Ms. Davis, we've been through the discovery materials. Not all of them, Your Honor. She approached the bench with a tablet. I've just received documentation that contradicts the official report. As the judge reviewed the screen, Reynolds turned back to Gabrielle, who remained standing. You should leave while you can, he muttered. Gabrielle met his gaze. Actually, I think I'll stay. The judge looked up, face grave. Lieutenant Reynolds approached the bench. After a hushed conference, the judge addressed the courtroom. In light of new evidence, this court will recess until tomorrow morning. The defendant is released to his mother's custody, pending further review. He turned to Reynolds. Lieutenant, remain for a moment. As people began to file out, Reynolds blocked Gabrielle's path. I don't know what game you're playing, but you picked the wrong town. The judge's voice cut through the tension. Lieutenant Reynolds, did you just physically assault Dr. Gabrielle Morgan, the newly appointed chief of police for Oakwood? The courtroom fell silent. Reynolds' face drained of color as he turned to stare at Gabrielle. Chief? The words seemed to stick in his throat. Gabrielle extended her hand. We haven't been formally introduced, Lieutenant. I look forward to our professional relationship. As she walked past him toward the bench, Gabrielle felt 30 years of waiting crystallize into a single perfect moment. The first move had been made. The game had begun. The conference room fell silent as Gabrielle entered, her heels clicking rhythmically against the polished floor. Around the oval table sat the department's command staff. Captains, lieutenants, senior officers. Faces she had memorized from personnel files over the past month. Some curious, some wary, all waiting. She placed a sealed manila envelope at the center of the table. Good morning. She began, remaining standing while others sat. Yesterday I attended a court proceeding. What I witnessed was not justice, but its perversion. Reynolds shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Beside him, a woman with sharp features and blonde hair pulled into a severe bun watched Gabrielle with calculating eyes. Nina Wallace, deputy chief, 15 years with the department, fast-tracked through the ranks. Chief Morgan, Wallace said, her voice pleasant but eyes cold. We're all eager to work with you, but there are departmental protocols. Protocols, Gabrielle interrupted, are only as good as the people enforcing them. I reviewed 53 cases from the past 10 years where suspects sustained significant injuries during arrest. She opened a laptop, turning the screen to face them. 49 involved suspects of color. 42 had malfunctioning body cameras. 38 were settled quietly with sealed records. She clicked through images, bruised faces, hospital reports, settlement documents. This stops today. An older officer with salt and pepper hair leaned forward. With all due respect, Chief, you can't come in here throwing accusations based on cherry-picked cases. We serve a tough community. Captain Hernandez isn't it, Gabriel acknowledged. Your record shows 27 civilian complaints in 17 years, 0 sustained. She moved around the table slowly. That's not a record of innocence. That's a record of protection. Reynolds slammed his palm on the table. This is bull. Lieutenant, Gabrielle cut him off. You'll have your turn to speak. Right now, I'm outlining my first directive as chief. She broke the seal on the envelope and distributed documents to each person. Effective immediately, I'm ordering a comprehensive audit of all case files from the past decade where suspects sustained injuries charges were dropped, post-arrest, or settlements were paid. The audit will be conducted by an independent team from the State Attorney General's office. Murmurs rippled through the room. Wallace's practiced smile faltered. Additionally, all officers involved in these cases will undergo mandatory retraining on appropriate use of force. Body cameras will be checked at the beginning and end of each shift. Any malfunction will trigger an immediate investigation. This is unprecedented, one captain protested. So is the pattern of abuse I've uncovered, Gabrielle replied. But that's just the beginning. She pressed a button on a remote. Behind her, a screen descended from the ceiling, displaying a single image, a mirror with the department's shield reflected in it. I'm implementing what I call the mirror protocol. From today, every action taken by this department will be subject to complete transparency. Each arrest, each use of force, each complaint will be recorded, reviewed, and reflected back to us and to the community we serve. She moved to the head of the table, placing both hands on its polished surface, leaning forward slightly. Justice is a mirror, ladies and gentlemen, and from now on, every one of us will have to look at our reflection in it. Reynolds pushed back from the table chair, scraping loudly against the floor. This is a witch hunt. You can't come in here and... I can and I am, Gabrielle stated flatly. Those who have nothing to hide have nothing to fear. As the meeting dissolved into heated discussions, Gabrielle gathered her materials. Outside in the hallway, a young officer waited, nervousness evident in his posture. Chief Morgan, I'm Officer Lynch. Devin Lynch. Gabrielle recognized him from her files. 26 years old, 3 years on the force, generally positive performance reviews, but nothing outstanding. What can I do for you, Officer Lynch? He glanced around, ensuring they were alone. That case you mentioned, Isaiah Carter, I was there that night. What's in the report? It's not what happened. Gabrielle's expression remained neutral. Are you making an official statement, Officer Lynch? He swallowed hard. Not yet. I thought you should know there are some of us who want things to change. Change requires courage, Officer Lynch, and courage requires action, not just words. As she walked away, Gabrielle felt the weight of 3 decades pressing against her chest. In her office, she closed the door and removed the frame fabric from her drawer, placing it on her desk where she could see it. The mirror is in place, Daddy, she whispered. Now we'll see what it reflects. The division within the department materialized faster than even Gabrielle had anticipated. By the end of her first week, clear factions had formed. Younger officers tentatively aligning with her reforms, veterans circling the wagons around Reynolds and his allies. The break room became contested territory conversations, falling silent when certain officers entered. In the patrol car lot, vehicle assignments mysteriously shifted to keep specific partnerships intact. Reports began arriving on Gabrielle's desk, with subtle differences in formatting, some meticulously detailed, others bare bones and vague. Gabrielle sat reviewing these patterns when Nina Wallace knocked on her open door, 2 coffee cups in hand. Thought you could use this, Wallace said, offering one to Gabrielle. Station coffee is terrible, so I brought the good stuff from Westside Cafe. Gabrielle accepted it with a nod. Thank you, Deputy Chief. Wallace took a seat without waiting for an invitation. Her crisp uniform and perfectly styled hair projected an image of control, but Gabrielle noted the slight tension around her eyes. We were in the same FBI training class at Quantico. Wallace said, sipping her coffee. Different tracks, but I remember you. Always first in tactical top scores and profiling. I remember, Gabrielle replied. You specialized in organizational psychology. Wallace smiled. Good memory. That's partly why I wanted to talk. You're approaching this department like it's a case to be solved, not an organization to be led. Gabrielle set her untouched coffee aside. Is there a difference when the organization itself is compromised? There's always a difference. Wallace leaned forward. Look, I get what you're trying to do. God knows this place needs shaking up. But you're moving too fast, creating resistance that will undermine your goals. I appreciate the concern, but I didn't take this job to maintain the status quo. Wallace's smile tightened. Nobody's asking you to, but there are officers here, good officers, who feel targeted by your audit. You're losing potential allies. And gaining others, Gabrielle countered. Officer Lynch approached me yesterday about the Carter case. Something flickered in Wallace's eyes. Devin, he's young, impressionable. Reynolds has been hard on him. Or perhaps he's simply tired of participating in a broken system? Wallace set her cup down with careful precision. We all want the same thing, Gabrielle. A department that serves its community effectively. But methods matter. Results matter more, Gabrielle replied. 3 excessive force complaints have been withdrawn since I announced the audit. Officers are suddenly remembering to activate their body cameras. Small improvements, but telling ones. And Reynolds is filing a union grievance against you for creating a hostile work environment. Gabrielle's expression didn't change. Let him. The union can't shield misconduct. No, but they can make reform impossible. Wallace stood. I want to help you succeed, Gabrielle. We were friends once. Were we? I remember a competitive training environment where we barely spoke. Wallace laughed softly. Maybe that's why I admired you. You never seemed to need anyone. She paused at the door. Just consider a different approach. Build bridges before you burn them all. After Wallace left, Gabrielle opened her laptop and pulled up personnel files. Nina Wallace, divorced 2 children, mortgage underwater after her ex-husband's failed business venture. Promoted to deputy chief under suspicious circumstances after her predecessor's abrupt retirement. Connected to Reynolds through his brother-in-law, a city councilman who had pushed for her promotion. Gabrielle closed the file and went to the window. In the parking lot below, she watched Wallace approach Reynolds, their heads bent in conversation. When Wallace glanced up toward Gabrielle's window, their eyes met briefly before Wallace quickly looked away. The next morning, Gabrielle arrived to find a small group of officers waiting in the lobby. Officer Lynch stood at the front, his expression determined despite his obvious nervousness. Chief Morgan, he said, stepping forward, we'd like to speak with you about the changes you're implementing. Gabrielle nodded. My office, 10 minutes. Once assembled, 7 officers, all under 35, a mix of genders and ethnicities. Gabrielle closed the door. I assume this isn't a social call. Lynch cleared his throat. No, ma'am, we want you to know that not everyone is against what you're doing. A female officer with short dark hair nodded. Some of us joined to make a difference, but the system here, it's hard to stay true to that. What Officer Chen is trying to say, Lynch continued, is that we want to help, but there are things you should know about how information moves in this department. Gabrielle leaned against her desk. I'm listening. Nothing's ever explicitly stated, Lynch explained. Orders that cross lines come through hints, suggestions. If evidence needs to disappear, someone mentions cleaning house or tidying the file. Officer Chen added, camera malfunctions are called technical difficulties. In order to rough someone up is making sure they understand. It's all coded, another officer said. Plausible deniability built into every interaction. Gabrielle studied their faces. Earnest concern, but also frightened. Why are you telling me this now? Lynch exchanged glances with the others. Because they're already working to undermine you. There's talk of weather patterns changing and short-term disruptions. They're calling you temporary storm, Chen added, implying you won't last. Gabrielle's expression remained impassive, but inside a cold certainty settled. Thank you for this information. I'll need each of you to document specific instances, dates, names. That could put targets on our backs, one officer objected. You already have targets on your backs, Gabrielle replied. The difference is now you have allies. She moved to her desk, writing something on a card. This is my personal number. Day or night, if you feel threatened or witness something that needs immediate attention. As they filed out, Lynch lingered. There's something else. About the Carter case. Gabrielle waited. I was there, he said quietly. I didn't stop it, but I didn't participate either. Reynolds and Peterson took the kid behind the building after the initial stop. When they brought him back, his face was bloody arm at a wrong angle. Did you report this? Lynch looked down. I started to file a supplemental report. Captain Hernandez intercepted it, told me to correct my memory if I wanted to keep my badge. And did you correct your memory? His silence was answer enough. It's not too late to do the right thing, Officer Lynch. After he left, Gabrielle sat at her desk, the pattern becoming clearer. Not just isolated incidents of brutality, but a system designed to perpetuate and protect them. A machinery of silence that had been running smoothly for decades. Outside her office, Reynolds watched Lynch walk away, his expression darkening. When he turned toward Gabrielle's office, she met his gaze through the glass, neither of them blinking. The battle lines were drawn. The pattern emerged slowly like a photograph developing in chemical bath. Each day brought new fragments. A misplaced report suddenly found a witness coming forward with a different account than what was recorded camera footage with suspicious gaps. Gabrielle established a secure room in the basement of the station walls covered with timelines, photographs, and case summaries. Only she and a select few had access. Officer Lynch, 2 officers from his group, and a civilian analyst she'd brought from her DOJ days. It's all connected, Gabrielle said, standing before the sprawling display. These aren't isolated incidents. The analyst, a methodical woman named Sarah Patel, nodded. The data supports that conclusion. Across 53 reviewed cases, we've found 17 involving the same 4 officers, 28 with identical terminology in the reports, and 31 with missing or corrupted video evidence. And what about demographics? Gabrielle asked, though she already knew the answer. Of the victims, 87% are people of color. 76% come from the 3 lowest income census tracts in Oakwood. 91% had court-appointed attorneys or no legal representation at all. Lynch studied a cluster of photographs. Isaiah Carter's case fits the pattern perfectly. Low-income family, single-parent, initial contact for a minor infraction. Jaywalking in his case. The escalation narrative is identical too, added Officer Chen, pointing to a report. Subject became agitated, then aggressive, then combative, necessitating control techniques. Gabrielle circled a date on the timeline. What happened here? There's a 3-month gap with no incidents matching the pattern. Lynch frowned. That was right after the Johnston case. Big settlement threatened lawsuit. Reynolds was on administrative leave during the investigation, which concluded with insufficient evidence of wrongdoing, Chen supplied. Body camera malfunctioned. No witnesses came forward. Gabrielle made a note. So the pattern pauses when Reynolds is removed, resumes when he returns. He's the constant. But not alone, Sarah added. The same 5 names appear in supporting roles consistently. Peterson Diaz, Wallace Hernandez, and Kingsley before his retirement. Gabrielle stopped her pen poised over the paper. Richard Kingsley. Yes, former deputy chief, retired 3 years ago. Gabrielle wrote the name carefully, drawing a circle around it. The room seemed suddenly colder. Later that afternoon, she visited Oakwood Memorial Hospital, her badge securing her access to medical records, normally protected by privacy laws. The patterns there were equally disturbing. Injuries inconsistent with reported incidents, treatment dates that sometimes preceded arrest, times diagnostic terms that contradicted police narratives. In the case of Isaiah Carter, the orthopedic surgeon's notes were explicit. Fracture pattern inconsistent with fall. Injury suggests direct impact with significant force applied downward while arm was in fixed position. Not a struggle, not resistance, a deliberate act. As Gabrielle was leaving, she spotted Sophia Carter in the hospital lobby, waiting as Isaiah underwent physical therapy. Their eyes met, and after a moment's hesitation, Gabrielle approached. Mrs. Carter, I'm Chief Morgan. Sophia's expression remained neutral. I know who you are. Here, do you have a moment to talk? They sat in the hospital's small courtyard, distant enough from others to ensure privacy. The charges against Isaiah have been dropped, Gabriel began. Yes, small comfort for a broken collarbone and nightmares that wake him screaming. Sophia's voice was steady, controlled. This isn't our first encounter with your officers, Chief Morgan. Just the worst. I'd like to hear about the others. Sophia studied her. Why? So you can file it away, add it to statistics. So I can build a case that changes things permanently, not just for Isaiah, but for everyone. Sophia was silent for a long moment. Isaiah was first stopped when he was 12, walking home from basketball practice with his cousin. Officers said they matched the description of suspects in a garage break-in, held them for 2 hours before calling me. And the officers involved Reynolds and another one, Peterson, I think. She shook her head. When I arrived, Reynolds told me I should keep a closer eye on my boy because statistics don't lie. What happened next? They let them go. No apology, no explanation for why they held 2 children in a patrol car for hours. Sophia's hands tightened around her purse. Isaiah was stopped again at 14, then 15, always for looking suspicious or matching a description. And the most recent incident, Sophia's composure cracked slightly. He was walking home from his job at the grocery store, still wearing his uniform shirt. They said he ran when they approached. She took a deep breath. Isaiah doesn't run from anything. He knows better. We've had that talk too many times. The original report claimed he resisted arrest, struck an officer. My son has never hit anyone in his life. Sophia met Gabriel's gaze directly. I raised him to respect authority, even when authority doesn't respect him. But that day something changed. When I saw him in that hospital bed, something in me broke. She reached into her purse and removed a folded paper. This is Isaiah's statement, what really happened. The public defender said it wouldn't help, that it would be his word against the officers. She handed it to Gabriel. I've been carrying it everywhere, hoping someone would actually want to hear the truth. Gabriel read the statement carefully. Isaiah's account described being slammed against a wall, his protests met with escalating violence. He named officers, quoted their words verbatim, detailed how his arm was twisted behind his back until something snapped. Has anyone else seen this statement? Gabriel asked. Just the public defender. She said without video evidence it wouldn't matter. Gabriel folded the paper and returned it. I need the original, and I need you to make a formal statement on record. Why would this time be different? Because this time someone's listening. Gabriel handed her a card. My direct line, when you're ready. As Gabriel walked back to her car, her phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. Storage room B, 3rd floor of station. Old server cabinet behind supply shelves. Password OKWD 1992 blue. Look for deleted body cam footage archive. GB. That evening, Gabrielle waited until most officers had left for the night. Using her master key, she accessed the rarely used storage room, navigating through dusty shelves to the back corner where an outdated server hummed quietly. The login screen accepted the password, revealing a database of files organized by date. She searched for the night of Isaiah's arrest, finding a folder marked Corrupt Unrecoverable. Inside was a video file. The footage was grainy, the audio distorted, but clear enough to show Isaiah Carter pressed against a brick wall, Reynolds' forearm across his throat. You think you're special? Reynolds' voice came through the static. Think the rules don't apply to you? I didn't do anything, Isaiah gasped. The camera angle shifted as the officer wearing it moved, capturing Reynolds, grabbing Isaiah's arm, twisting it behind his back with deliberate slowness. Still think you didn't do anything? The sickening crack was audible even through the poor audio quality. Isaiah's scream cut through the night. The video ended abruptly. Gabrielle sat in the dim light of the server room, her hands steady as she copied the file to a secure drive. The machinery of silence had its first significant crack. GB George Bellamy, former IT administrator for the department, retired just months before her arrival. Someone else who had been carrying truth, waiting for the right moment. The mirror was beginning to reflect. The unmarked envelope appeared on Gabrielle's desk between her morning briefing and lunch. No postmark, no delivery record in the security log. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a USB drive. The paper contained one typed line: "Muddied waters run deep. Step carefully." The USB drive held a single file, a scanned police report from 30 years ago. Ethan Morgan's case. Attached was a photo. Gabrielle had never seen her father lying on the sidewalk. Grocery items scattered around him, a small girl, herself, standing frozen beside him. Gabrielle's hands trembled as she closed the file. The message was clear: someone knew why she was really here. Outside her office, the day continued with artificial normalcy. Officers came and went, reports were filed, calls answered. But beneath the routine currents were shifting. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Eyes followed her movements with new wariness. By mid-afternoon, Deputy Chief Wallace requested an urgent meeting. "There's a situation developing," Wallace said, closing Gabrielle's office door. "Social media posts claiming you have a personal vendetta against the department. Anonymous sources suggesting your appointment was politically motivated." "Social media noise is hardly a crisis," Gabrielle replied, keeping her expression neutral despite the hollow feeling in her chest. Wallace placed a tablet on the desk. "It's more than noise. Look." The screen showed a local news website. The headline read, "New Police Chief's Hidden Agenda Sources Reveal Personal Connection to Historic Case." The article was carefully worded to avoid direct accusations, but the implications were clear. Gabrielle had concealed her connection to Oakwood, had pursued the position to settle old scores rather than serve the community. "The mayor's office is receiving calls," Wallace continued. "The police union is demanding a statement. Reynolds is formally requesting your recusal from any investigations involving him or his officers, citing conflict of interest." Gabrielle closed the tablet. "And what do you think?" Deputy Chief Wallace's professional mask slipped momentarily. "I think you should have told me. We're supposed to be a team. Are we? Because from where I sit, the lines seem rather blurred." "What does that mean?" "It means I find it interesting that these anonymous sources appeared the day after I accessed the archive server." Wallace's expression hardened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Not yet, but the timing is concerning. I've supported your initiatives publicly." "Public support means little when private actions contradict it." Wallace stood. "The city manager has called an emergency oversight meeting for tomorrow morning. They're considering a temporary suspension while these allegations are reviewed." "On what grounds?" "Creating department instability, failure to disclose conflicts of interest, overstepping authority with the audit." Wallace paused. "It would be administrative leave, paid, just until things settle." After Wallace left, Gabrielle sat motionless, weighing options. The counterattack had come faster and from more directions than she'd anticipated. Someone had been preparing for her arrival, had resources ready to deploy. Her phone rang. Officer Lynch. "Chief, there's been an accident. George Bellamy was hit by a car outside his home an hour ago. He's in critical condition." Gabrielle's blood went cold. "Any witnesses?" "None that have come forward. The driver fled the scene." Not an accident, a message. That evening, as Gabrielle left the station, she found her car windshield covered with printouts of the news article. Across one, written in red marker, "Go home. It's too late." She gathered the papers, carefully placing them in an evidence bag. As she looked up, she caught Reynolds watching from the station entrance, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The next morning, Gabrielle arrived at City Hall for the oversight meeting to find the room already packed. Reynolds and his allies on one side, a smaller group of younger officers, including Lynch, on the other. At the front, the city manager and 3 council members waited with grave expressions. "Chief Morgan," the city manager began, "serious concerns have been raised about your leadership in the direction of the department under your command." For the next hour, Gabrielle listened as Reynolds and others detailed their grievances. Morale deteriorating, officers feeling targeted, community trust undermined by reckless accusations. When her turn came to speak, Gabrielle approached the podium, slowly placing a single file before her. "Mr. City Manager, council members, I stand before you, not just as chief of police, but as a daughter of Oakwood." Her voice remained steady despite the murmurs that rippled through the room. 30 years ago, my father was killed on these streets by officers who were never held accountable." She opened the file, removing the photograph that had been sent to her office. I didn't disclose this connection because it wasn't relevant to my qualifications. My record speaks for itself. FBI, Department of Justice commendations for integrity and leadership. Reynolds interrupted. This proves our point. You came here for revenge, not reform. Gabriel turned to face him directly. I came here for justice, Lieutenant, something this department has forgotten how to deliver. She addressed the council again. In just 2 weeks, I've uncovered evidence of systematic abuse, falsified reports, and coordinated cover-ups. The resistance to my audit isn't about morale or community trust. It's about fear of exposure. These are serious allegations, the city manager said. Do you have proof? I'm gathering it systematically, which is precisely why certain officers want me removed. She placed a USB drive on the table. This contains preliminary findings, enough to justify a full state investigation if I'm prevented from completing my work. The room fell silent. Reynolds' confident expression faltered. Given the circumstances, Gabriel continued, I understand the council's position. If you decide to place me on administrative leave, I accept that decision. But be aware that the moment I walk out that door, this evidence goes to the State Attorney General, the FBI Civil Rights Division, and every major news outlet in the country. She gathered her materials. The choice is yours. Address these issues internally under my leadership or have them exposed publicly by forces beyond your control. As she stepped away from the podium, the back doors of the chamber opened. Sophia Carter entered Isaiah beside her in his sling. Behind them came Michael Washington, a man Gabriel had interviewed, who had spent 2 years in prison based on evidence later proven to be falsified. More people filed in silently. Families whose lives had been damaged by the system Gabriel was fighting to change. They took seats at the back of the room, their presence a silent testament. The city manager cleared his throat. In light of these developments, the council will recess to consider its position. Outside in the hallway, Wallace approached Gabriel. That was quite a performance. Not a performance, a promise. Wallace lowered her voice. You're making enemies you can't afford, Gabriel. Even if you win today, they'll find another way to stop you. I'm counting on it, Gabriel replied, because each attempt makes their desperation more visible. When the council reconvened, their decision was announced with obvious reluctance. Chief Morgan would remain in her position, but with oversight from a special committee that would review all major decisions. A compromise that satisfied no one completely, which Gabriel knew was often the mark of a necessary first step. As she left City Hall, rain had begun to fall, turning the world into a collection of reflective surfaces. She paused at the bottom of the steps, looking at her own image fragmented across puddles and wet pavement. 30 years ago, she had stood frozen as her father's blood spread across concrete. Today, she had refused to be silenced. In the distance, thunder rolled across Oakwood like a warning, or perhaps a promise. The storm had only just begun. I've completed part 1 of Mirror of Justice at approximately 6,000 words following your outline structure and maintaining the cinematic emotional style you requested. The narrative follows the key plot points from your outline, while developing the characters and establishing the emotional core of the story. Rain pattered against the windows of Gabrielle's apartment as she spread case files across her kitchen table. 3 weeks into her tenure as chief, the patterns had become unmistakable. Not just isolated incidents, but a system designed to protect itself at all costs. She pinned photographs to a corkboard. Isaiah Carter's bruised face, Michael Washington's mugshot, others whose cases had initially seemed unrelated, but now formed a constellation of abuse. Between them, she stretched red thread connecting officers' locations, terminology, and reports. Her phone buzzed with a text from Officer Lynch Bellamy, awake. Asking for you. The hospital corridor was quiet at this late hour. Outside the ICU, a uniformed officer nodded to Gabriel, one of Reynolds' people ostensibly there to protect the hit-and-run victim. Gabriel noted how his hand moved to his radio as she approached. I need to speak with Mr. Bellamy, she said. He's resting, Chief. The officer replied, not quite meeting her eyes. I won't disturb him long. The officer shifted uncomfortably. Lieutenant Reynolds said no visitors except family. Since when does a lieutenant override the chief of police? Gabriel moved past him, hearing his hurried radio call as the door closed behind her. George Bellamy lay still against white sheets, his face mottled with bruises, one leg suspended in traction. His eyes opened as Gabriel approached, alert despite the morphine drip beside his bed. "You found it," he whispered, voice raspy. Gabriel nodded, pulling a chair close. The server, the footage of Isaiah Carter. Not just Carter. Bellamy's fingers twitched against the blanket. Years of them. I kept copies. Insurance. Why didn't you come forward before? A painful smile crossed his face. Same reason others don't. Family, mortgage, pension. His breathing grew labored. The driver wasn't random. You saw them? Didn't need to. Got a warning call that morning. Said accidents happen to people with loose lips. Gabriel leaned closer. I need names, George. Check the server. Subfolder, System Maintenance 2019. Password, Blue Wall. Everything's there. His eyes darted to the door. They know I talked to you. Won't let me live to testify. I'll arrange protection. Bellamy's laugh turned into a cough. From who? The same department that did this? He gripped her wrist with surprising strength. My wife's sister lives in Phoenix. Get me transferred there. Today. I'll make it happen. As Gabriel stood to leave, Bellamy added, Chief Morgan, your father's case, it's in there too. Kingsley was supervisor then. He signed off on the report. The name hit Gabriel like a physical blow. Richard Kingsley, the man who had buried the truth about her father's death, was connected to the current corruption. Not just a historical footnote, but a link in an unbroken chain. Outside Bellamy's room, Reynolds was waiting Nina Wallace beside him. Interfering with a witness, Chief? Reynolds asked, his tone mockingly formal. Interviewing a victim, Gabriel corrected. Mr. Bellamy will be transferred to a hospital in Arizona for his safety. On whose authority? Wallace asked. Mine. Effective immediately. Reynolds stepped closer. This is becoming a pattern, Morgan. Overstepping, circumventing procedures, pursuing personal vendettas. Gabriel met his gaze steadily. Speaking of patterns, Lieutenant, I've been reviewing case files where your name appears with suspicious frequency. Perhaps we should discuss those. Careful, Reynolds warned, voice dropping. You've been asking questions about Richard Kingsley, too. Some roads are better left untraveled. Is that a threat? An observation. Kingsley has friends in high places, the kind that can make a police chief's position precarious. Wallace placed a hand on Reynolds' arm. What Victor means is that we're concerned about the department's reputation. These investigations are creating unnecessary tension. Unnecessary, Gabriel repeated. Tell that to Isaiah Carter, to Michael Washington, to George Bellamy lying in that hospital bed. Alleged incidents, Reynolds said dismissively. No pattern, no conspiracy. Then you have nothing to worry about when the truth comes out, Gabriel replied, walking past them. By afternoon, she had arranged Bellamy's transfer using her DOJ connections, bypassing local channels that might have sabotaged the move. As the ambulance pulled away from Oakwood Memorial, Gabriel noticed a dark sedan following at a distance. She took a photograph of its license plate before it turned at the next intersection. Back at the station, she found Officer Lynch waiting in her office, tension evident in his posture. There's something you need to see, he said, placing a USB drive on her desk. I was reviewing archived emails for the Carter case and found these. The emails were between Reynolds and several officers, including Nina Wallace, discussing how to handle problem witnesses and adjust narratives when reports didn't align. None mentioned specific cases or explicit wrongdoing. Everything was carefully coded, but the implications were clear. These go back 3 years, Lynch said. Wallace was involved from the beginning. Gabriel wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still stung. What made you dig into these archives now, Officer Lynch? He hesitated. After the oversight meeting, Wallace pulled me aside, asked questions about what you were focusing on, what evidence you had. Said she could help ensure the right perspective prevailed. She was fishing for information, Lynch nodded. I gave her nothing useful, but it got me thinking about her role in all this. So I checked archives from when she was promoted to deputy chief. And her promotion coincided with the Johnson settlement, the case that almost brought down Reynolds. She was instrumental in bearing key evidence that would have implicated him. Gabriel turned to the window, watching officers move through the parking lot below. She was rewarded for her loyalty with a promotion and something else. Lynch handed her another document. Mortgage refinanced at well below market rate through a company owned by Councilman Phillips. Reynolds' brother-in-law. The same. The picture was becoming clearer. Not just brutality and cover-ups, but a network of favors, financial incentives, and political protection. A system far more entrenched than she had initially realized. That evening, as Gabrielle was preparing to leave, Officer Chen appeared at her door, visibly shaken. "Chief, there's a woman here to see you. Sophia Carter. She says it's urgent." Sophia sat rigidly in the interview room, hands clasped tightly on the table. When Gabrielle entered, she looked up with eyes hardened by fresh anger. "They came to my house," she said without preamble. "Two officers, not in uniform, but I recognize them from court. They said Isaiah's case wasn't really closed, that new evidence might surface if we kept causing trouble." "Did they identify themselves?" "Didn't need to. Their message was clear enough." Sophia pushed a folded paper across the table. "They left this." It was a printout of Isaiah's juvenile record. Minor infractions, mostly warnings, nothing serious. Across the top, someone had written, "It would be a shame if something more serious appeared here." "Isaiah's terrified," Sophia continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Not just for himself, for me. He keeps saying we should drop the whole thing." "And what do you think?" Gabrielle asked. Sophia's chin lifted. "I think I'm tired of being afraid. 5 years I've been fighting this system, watching it crush kids like mine. I'm not stopping now." Gabrielle nodded, a decision crystallizing. "I need your help, Mrs. Carter. Not just your testimony, but your voice. There are others like you, families who've been silenced, cases buried. Together you could create a chorus the city couldn't ignore." "What exactly are you proposing?" "A public forum. Testimonies from everyone affected by police misconduct in Oakwood, documented, recorded, impossible to dismiss." Sophia considered this. "You'd face serious blowback. Your own department would turn against you." "Some already have," Gabrielle replied. "Others are waiting to see which way the wind blows. But there are good officers too, ones who want change but need cover to stand up. And you think our stories would provide that cover?" "I think the truth spoken by enough voices becomes impossible to silence." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. "When I was a girl, my grandmother used to say that justice is like water. It might be diverted, might be dammed up for a while, but eventually it finds its way through." She met Gabrielle's gaze. "I'll help you make a flood they can't contain." As Sophia left, Gabrielle felt a subtle shift in the building's atmosphere. Word of their meeting would spread quickly. Lines would be drawn more clearly. The next move would come soon. She didn't have to wait long. The following morning, she arrived to find a formal notice from the police union requesting her recusal from all investigations involving Reynolds or officers under his command, citing demonstrated bias and conflict of interest. Simultaneously, an email arrived from the mayor's office scheduling an urgent discussion about department leadership and community relations. The pressure was mounting from all sides, but Gabrielle had anticipated this. While they had been building their case against her, she had been quietly assembling her own, documenting every threat, every obstruction, creating secure backups of all evidence. The more they pushed, the more they revealed themselves. That afternoon, she called a meeting with the small group of officers she had come to trust, Lynch, Chen, and 4 others who had demonstrated support for her reforms. In the secure room in the basement, she laid out her strategy. "They're attempting to isolate me," she explained. "Remove me from investigations, then from the department entirely. We need to accelerate our timeline." Officer Chen frowned. "The audit is only half complete. We need more time to build an airtight case." "Time we don't have," Gabrielle replied. "We need to shift the battlefield, make this public before they can bury it again." She outlined her plan, a town hall meeting where victims of police misconduct could share their stories publicly. Simultaneously, they would release key findings from their audit to selected journalists and the state attorney general's office. "It's risky," Lynch warned. "Reynolds and his allies will do everything possible to discredit the witnesses and the evidence." "Which is why we need to make it too big to ignore," Gabrielle said. "Not just one case or victim, but dozens. A pattern so clear that even their political allies can't look away." The officers exchanged uncertain glances. This could end careers, one said quietly, maybe even prosecutions. It should, Gabrielle replied, for those who've abused their power and the trust of this community, but it could also begin the healing this department desperately needs. As they dispersed, Lynch lingered. There's something else you should know. Richard Kingsley is back in town, has been meeting with Reynolds privately. Gabrielle felt a chill despite the room's warmth. Keep an eye on those meetings if you can, safely. That night alone in her apartment, Gabrielle accessed the server folder Bellamy had mentioned. The password Blue Wall revealed hundreds of files, body camera footage, email exchanges, recordings of phone calls, a meticulous archive of corruption spanning more than a decade, and there in a subfolder marked simply 1992, she found it, the unaltered report of her father's shooting. The truth she had waited 30 years to confirm. The original witness statements never included in the official record described Ethan Morgan raising his hand's grocery bag still hanging from his wrists. The officer's body camera, technology then in its infancy, had not malfunctioned as claimed, but had captured footage that contradicted the official narrative. And at the bottom of the report authorizing its alteration and the evidence suppression, Richard Kingsley's signature. Gabrielle sat motionless, the blue light of the screen illuminating tears she hadn't realized were falling. The confirmation brought no satisfaction, only a hollowness that echoed through her chest. Her phone rang, breaking the silence. An unknown number. Chief Morgan. The voice was male, elderly, unfamiliar. Who is this someone who knew your father? A pause. And who knows what you're trying to do now? Gabrielle's hand tightened around the phone. Richard Kingsley. We should meet, alone. The Riverside Park North Bench tomorrow at 7 a.m. Why would I agree to that? Because I'm the only one left who knows the whole story. About your father, about what's happening now. His voice softened. And because you've waited 30 years for answers only I can provide. The line went dead before she could respond. Gabrielle didn't sleep that night. She reviewed Bellamy's files repeatedly, searching for connections she might have missed, fortifying herself with the evidence of corruption that had touched her own life so intimately. Dawn found her at the Riverside Park, the bench visible from where she parked. She waited watching as an elderly man approached, slowly leaning on a cane. Thinner than in his official photographs, hair now completely white, but unmistakably Richard Kingsley. As she walked toward him, memories flooded back. Glimpses of him at the police station after her father's death, his face impassive as her mother demanded answers. The man who had buried the truth beneath layers of bureaucracy and lies. Dr. Morgan, he said, as she approached, voice weaker in person. You look like him. Same eyes. You would know, Gabrielle replied. You're the one who made sure his case was closed without justice. Kingsley lowered himself onto the bench with effort. Is that what you think happened? It's what I know happened. I've seen the original reports, the altered evidence. He nodded, staring out at the river. Yes, I signed those papers. Authorized the changes. His gaze shifted to her. The question you should be asking is why? Does it matter you buried the truth? You protected officers who murdered an innocent man? It was more complicated than that. Kingsley's hands trembled slightly on his cane. There was pressure from above. Political considerations. The department was under scrutiny for other incidents. Spare me the excuses, Gabrielle said coldly. Nothing justifies what you did. Not justifying, explaining. He coughed, a rattling sound deep in his chest. I made a choice I've regretted every day since, but that's not why I asked you here. Then why? To warn you. Reynolds is just the visible face of something much larger. The system you're fighting extends beyond the police department, into city government, the court's business interests. Gabrielle studied him, searching for deception. Why tell me this now? Because history is repeating itself. The same forces that silence the truth about your father are mobilizing against you. He reached into his jacket, removing an envelope. This is everything I know. Names, dates, connections. Use it carefully. Gabrielle didn't take it immediately. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, but verify what's in here, and you'll find it's true. He placed the envelope on the bench between them. I can't undo what I did to your father, but perhaps I can help prevent the same happening to you. You created people like Reynolds, Gabrielle said, echoing his own words. You built the system I'm fighting. Yes, he admitted. We did. One compromise at a time, one buried case after another. Each seemed small on its own, necessary for the greater good we told ourselves. His eyes, watery with age, held hers. But compromises accumulate. Eventually, they become the foundation of something monstrous. As Gabriel reached for the envelope, Kingsley added, "They're already moving against you. The mayor's meeting tomorrow isn't about community relations. It's about suspending you pending an investigation into departmental disruption." How do you know this? I still have friends in the system. Not everyone agrees with what's happening, even if they lack the courage to stand against it. Gabrielle slipped the envelope into her jacket. Why risk helping me? Kingsley was silent for a long moment, watching a pair of geese glide across the river's surface. I'm dying, Dr. Morgan. Pancreatic cancer. 3 months, maybe less. He turned to her, his expression stripped of pretense. When you reach the end, the lies you've told yourself about necessary evils become harder to believe. The faces of those you failed become clearer. He struggled to his feet. Your father's face has been the clearest of all. As he walked away, Gabriel called after him. I'm not doing this just for him. Kingsley paused, looking back. I know. That's why you might succeed where others failed. The envelope from Kingsley contained exactly what he had promised. A detailed map of Oakwood's power structure, financial connections between Reynolds' brother-in-law and development companies that had benefited from city contracts, judges who had consistently ruled in favor of the department in misconduct cases later receiving political support for re-election, a network of mutual protection and benefit that had operated unchallenged for decades. Gabrielle spent hours verifying the information, cross-referencing it with public records and the evidence she had already gathered. By morning, she had constructed a more complete picture of what she was facing. Not just corrupt officers, but an entire ecosystem designed to maintain power and silence dissent. The mayor's office called moving their meeting to that afternoon, an attempt to catch her unprepared. Gabrielle agreed, using the hours before to put contingency plans in place. She encrypted key files and sent secure copies to trusted contacts at the DOJ and FBI. She briefed Lynch and Chen on what to do if she was suddenly removed from her position. The mayor's reception area was cool and impersonal, all glass and polished surfaces. Gabrielle waited precisely 7 minutes before the assistant ushered her into the inner office. Mayor Patricia Hendricks sat behind an imposing desk, flanked by the city attorney and, surprisingly, Nina Wallace. The deputy chief's presence confirmed Kingsley's warning. This was not a routine meeting. Chief Morgan, the mayor began, her tone professionally concerned. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Of course, Mayor Hendricks. I'll be direct. The council has expressed serious concerns about the direction of the police department under your leadership. There have been allegations of targeted investigations, misuse of resources, and the creation of a hostile work environment. Eturm. The city attorney, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, added, additionally, questions have been raised about your failure to disclose personal connections to Oakwood that might constitute conflicts of interest. Gabrielle noted that neither mentioned who had raised these concerns. I assume Lieutenant Reynolds features prominently among those expressing these concerns. The mayor's smile tightened. Multiple officers have come forward, as well as community members, worried about department stability. Interesting, Gabrielle replied, because I've been hearing from community members too, those who've suffered from the department's stability for years. People like Sophia Carter, Michael Washington, and dozens of others whose cases were buried to maintain the status quo. Wallace leaned forward. Gabrielle, no one's questioning that there may be isolated incidents requiring attention, but your approach has created division when we need unity. Unity requires truth, Deputy Chief, something in short supply at the department until recently. The mayor sighed. This is precisely the adversarial posture that concerns us. Therefore, effective immediately, the council has voted to place you on administrative leave pending a full review of your conduct and decision-making. Gabrielle had expected this, but found the reality no less infuriating. On what specific grounds? The city attorney slid a document across the desk. Failure to disclose conflicts of interest, creation of a hostile work environment, misallocation of department resources, and exceeding authorized investigative parameters. Gabrielle didn't touch the paper. And who will lead the department during this review? Deputy Chief Wallace will serve as acting chief, the mayor replied, nodding toward Nina. She has the experience and community relationships necessary to restore stability. Gabrielle turned to Wallace, seeing the carefully concealed satisfaction in her former classmate's eyes. Congratulations on your promotion, Nina. I assume Lieutenant Reynolds is pleased with the arrangement. Wallace's expression hardened slightly. This isn't personal, Gabrielle. It's about what's best for the department. Is it, or is it about protecting a system that served you well? Gabrielle stood. Before I leave, I should mention that I've forwarded evidence of systematic misconduct within the department to federal authorities. They'll be particularly interested in financial connections between department leadership and certain city officials. The mayor's practiced composure slipped. That would be an extremely unwise course of action, Chief Morgan. No more unwise than attempting to silence the truth about what's happening in Oakwood. Gabrielle moved toward the door. You should know that regardless of my employment status, the Community Forum on Police Misconduct will proceed as scheduled next week. I imagine the media will find it even more interesting now. Outside the mayor's office, Gabrielle felt oddly calm. The move against her had been predictable, almost textbook. What they didn't realize was that she had anticipated it from the beginning, had planned for it, even counted on it. When she reached her car, she found Officer Lynch waiting. They did it, didn't they? He asked, his expression grim. Administrative leave, effective immediately. Wallace, acting chief as expected. Gabrielle unlocked her car. It's time for phase 2. Contact the others, secure the evidence we've gathered. Use the protocols we discussed. Lynch nodded. What about you? I'll be working from outside now. Sometimes the most effective pressure comes from beyond the system. As Gabrielle drove away from City Hall, she glanced in her rearview mirror. Nina Wallace stood on the steps watching her departure with an unreadable expression. That evening, Wallace appeared at Gabrielle's apartment door. May I come in? She asked, no longer in uniform, but dressed in casual clothes that somehow failed to make her appear less official. Gabrielle stepped aside, allowing her entry, but maintaining a careful distance. Congratulations again, Acting Chief. I assume you're here to collect my badge and gun. That's not necessary yet. The paperwork won't be processed until tomorrow. Wallace moved into the living room, noting the case files spread across the coffee table. Still working. Some habits are hard to break. Wallace sank onto the couch, suddenly looking tired. This isn't how I wanted things to play out, Gabrielle. No, because from where I stand, it looks exactly like what you've been working toward since I arrived. That's not fair. I tried to help you navigate the politics, advised you to move more cautiously, while simultaneously undermining my authority and reporting my movements to Reynolds. Wallace flinched. It's more complicated than that. Then explain it to me, Gabrielle said, sitting across from her. Explain how my former classmate became so deeply embedded in a corrupt system that she would help destroy someone trying to fix it. For a moment, Wallace's carefully maintained facade cracked. You think I had choices? You think I wanted to be part of this? Her voice rose slightly. When I joined this department, I had ideals too. Then reality set in. A single mother with 2 kids, underwater mortgage parents needing care. Many officers face similar challenges without compromising their integrity. Easy to say when you've never had to choose between principles and feeding your children. Wallace leaned forward. Reynolds and his people approached me after my divorce, offered help with my mortgage, promoted me when no one else would consider a woman for leadership. Small compromises at first, looking the other way on minor infractions, backing up fellow officers' reports. That evolved into protecting brutality and falsifying evidence. Wallace's eyes hardened. You don't get to judge me. You breezed in with your federal credentials and righteousness, never having to live in this system day after day, year after year. I lived with its consequences, Gabrielle replied quietly. I watched my father die because of small compromises like yours. A heavy silence filled the room. What do you want from me, Nina? Gabrielle finally asked. To stop before this destroys you completely. The forum you're planning, the evidence you're threatening to release, you're making powerful enemies who won't hesitate to silence you permanently. Is that concern or a threat? Wallace stood. Take it however you want. But remember, I know what they're capable of better than you do. She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. One last thing. They're planning to discredit your witnesses before the forum. Pressure them, find dirt, whatever it takes, especially Sophia Carter. Why tell me this? Wallace's expression was unreadable. Maybe I still believe in the same things you do. I just stopped fighting for them a long time ago. After she left, Gabrielle sat motionless, processing the conversation. Wallace had confirmed what she already suspected. The corruption wasn't limited to actions, but had infected the very souls of those involved, creating moral compromises that accumulated over time until right and wrong became hopelessly blurred. Her phone buzzed with a message from Officer Chen. Wallace cleaned out your office. All evidence boxes moved to secured storage. Lynch watching them? Another text followed from an unknown number. They're moving faster than expected. Kingsley hospitalized after fall at home. Convenient timing. Be careful. GB. Gabrielle made 3 calls in rapid succession. To Sophia Carter, warning her to be vigilant. To her DOJ contact, updating them on developments. And to a journalist she trusted, providing context for what was unfolding. The battle was entering a new phase. They had removed her from the inside, thinking it would silence her. Instead, they had freed her to fight without institutional constraints. Outside, rain began to fall again, sheets of water distorting the streetlights into fractured halos. Gabrielle stood at her window, watching her reflection fragment and reform with each rivulet. The mirror was cracked, but still reflecting truth. Richard Kingsley's hospital room was under guard, officially for his protection after his accidental fall, but Gabrielle recognized the officer stationed outside as one of Reynolds' closest allies. Whatever Kingsley might say was being carefully controlled. Using her federal credentials rather than her now suspended position as chief, Gabrielle gained access to his medical records. The fall had resulted in a fractured hip and concussion, serious injuries for a man already weakened by cancer. The attending physician, a woman with tired eyes and a direct manner, spoke candidly once they were alone in her office. Those injuries aren't consistent with a simple fall, she said, showing Gabrielle the x-rays. The pattern suggests impact from multiple directions. In my professional opinion, Mr. Kingsley was assaulted. Has he said anything to that effect? The doctor shook her head. He's been sedated since admission. Convenient timing for those claiming it was an accident. Gabrielle thanked her and left, weighing options. Directly approaching Kingsley was impossible given the guard, but there were other avenues to pursue. She drove to the address listed in Kingsley's file, a modest house in an aging subdivision. Yellow police tape crossed the front door, evidence of an active investigation into his fall, but the garage door was untaped, its window dark. Checking that no patrol cars were nearby, Gabrielle approached the side entrance. The lock was simple, yielding easily to skills she had learned during her FBI training. Inside the garage was orderly tools hanging on pegboards, garden equipment neatly stored. Against the back wall stood a filing cabinet. Inside, Gabrielle found folders organized by year: personal records, tax documents, correspondence. In the drawer marked 1990-1995, she found a folder labeled simply Morgan. The contents confirmed what Bellamy's files had suggested. Kingsley had been pressured to close Ethan Morgan's case quickly and cleanly. Internal memos showed concern about department image and potential civil unrest if the shooting was ruled unjustified. But there was more. Private notes Kingsley had kept documenting his growing unease with the cover-up. Names of officers who had witnessed the shooting, but whose statements were altered or excluded. References to political considerations and outside pressure to maintain the narrative of a justified shooting. Most damning was a memo from then-Mayor Harold Wilson explicitly directing Kingsley to resolve this matter without further departmental liability or community disruption. The subtext was clear. Truth was less important than stability. As Gabrielle photographed these documents, she heard a car approaching. Quickly replacing the folder, she moved to the side window. A patrol car had pulled up outside, 2 officers emerging. She slipped out through the back of the garage, circling through neighboring yards until she reached her car parked 2 blocks away. The evidence was secure in her phone. More pieces of a puzzle 30 years in the making. That evening, she met Officer Lynch at a diner outside city limits. Neutral territory where they were unlikely to be recognized. Acting Chief Wallace has suspended the audit, Lynch reported, keeping his voice low despite the relatively empty restaurant. All evidence has been locked away access restricted to her and Reynolds. Expected, Gabriel replied. What about the witnesses we interviewed? Some are being re-interviewed. Official reason is procedural clarification, but Chen says it's more like intimidation. They're especially focused on Isaiah Carter's case. Nina warned me they would target Sophia. Lynch frowned. You still trust Wallace after everything? Trust isn't binary, Officer Lynch. Nina is compromised, but she's not entirely lost. Gabriel sipped her coffee. What about Kingsley's hospitalization? Any chatter about that? Nothing specific. Reynolds visited him yesterday, stayed about 20 minutes. No record of what was discussed. Gabriel shared what she had found in Kingsley's garage. The pattern is identical to what we're seeing now. Truth subordinated to stability, political pressure, overriding justice. So what's our next move? Lynch asked. Without your position or access to department resources? We use what they've given us. Freedom to operate outside the system. Gabrielle laid out her plan: accelerate the community forum, expand media involvement, activate her federal contacts. They think removing me neutralizes the threat. We need to show them it's had the opposite effect. As they parted, Lynch hesitated. Chief, the pressure inside is getting worse. Officers who supported you are being reassigned isolated. Chen's been moved to night shift, others to desk duty. They're making examples of us. Can you hold the line a little longer? Lynch nodded firmly. We didn't sign up to be part of the problem. The next morning, Gabrielle visited Arizona, where George Bellamy was recovering under protection arranged through her DOJ contacts. His condition had stabilized, though the fear in his eyes remained. They came to my hospital room, he told her. Reynolds and another officer I didn't recognize. Said they knew I'd been talking to you, that my accident could have been much worse. Did they directly threaten you? Didn't need to. Reynolds just stood there while the other guy talked about how dangerous Oakwood had become lately. Break-ins, assaults, how even being in the hospital wasn't completely safe. Bellamy's hand trembled as he reached for water. Then Reynolds said, shame about Kingsley. Memory problems after head injuries can be permanent. The message was unmistakable. Speak out and suffer consequences, possibly fatal ones. I need you to make a recorded statement, Gabrielle said. Everything you know, everything you've seen. We'll keep it secure until it's needed. Bellamy hesitated. What about my wife? My family? They'll remain under protection. I give you my word. For the next 3 hours, Bellamy detailed what he had witnessed during his years in the department. Evidence, tampering, report alterations, the systematic covering up of misconduct. He named names, provided dates, described the gradual normalization of corruption he had observed. When they reached Ethan Morgan's case, his voice grew strained. I was just starting in IT then, new to the job, eager to please. They had me edit the body camera footage. Primitive technology back then, but enough to show what really happened. He couldn't meet Gabrielle's eyes. Your father had his hands up. The grocery bags were still hanging from his wrists. The officer panicked, fired without justification. Gabrielle maintained her professional demeanor, despite the pain lancing through her chest. And Kingsley initially pushed back, wanted a proper investigation, but the pressure from above was intense. Mayor Wilson was concerned about racial tensions, upcoming elections. Kingsley eventually gave in, signed off on the altered report, authorized the evidence to be sealed. Why keep copies of these files? Why risk everything to preserve them? Bellamy was quiet for a moment. My father was a history teacher. Always said that those who control records control the truth. His gaze finally met hers. I couldn't change what happened, but I could make sure the truth survived, even if no one ever saw it. As Gabrielle prepared to leave, Bellamy added, there's something else you should know about Reynolds. He wasn't directly involved in your father's shooting, but he was mentored by the officer who was Thomas Garrett. Learned from him, adopted his methods. When Garrett retired, Reynolds carried on his approach. A legacy of abuse, Gabrielle murmured. A system that rewards certain behaviors and punishes others, Bellamy corrected. Reynolds isn't an anomaly. He's the product of institutional design. The connection was both horrifying and clarifying. Not just individual bad actors, but generations of them, each teaching the next, protected by a structure that valued order above justice. Driving back to Oakwood, Gabrielle's phone rang. Lynch's voice was urgent, barely audible over background noise. Kingsley's dead. Pulmonary embolism, they're saying. But the timing, too convenient, Gabriel finished, especially after his fall. There's more. They're moving against Sophia Carter tomorrow. Juvenile services visits supposedly routine but timed right before the forum. They'll look for any reason to question her fitness as a parent. Who authorized it? Wallace signed the request, but everyone knows Reynolds is behind it. After hanging up, Gabrielle made a decision. She had been playing defense, responding to their moves. It was time to change tactics. She drove directly to Nina Wallace's home, a modest split level in a middle-class neighborhood. Lights glowed behind drawn curtains as Gabrielle knocked on the front door. Wallace opened it, surprise quickly masked by wariness. She was in casual clothes, a glass of wine in hand. Behind her, children's homework was spread across the dining table. "This is inappropriate, Gabrielle," she said, not inviting her in. "So is using juvenile services to intimidate a witness," Gabrielle replied. "Cancel the Carter inspection, Nina." Wallace glanced behind her, lowering her voice. "I can't. Reynolds is watching every move I make." "Then you have a choice to make, right now." "It's not that simple." "It is that simple. Kingsley is dead. Bellamy was almost killed. How many more lives are you willing to sacrifice for your mortgage and promotion?" Wallace's composure cracked slightly. "You don't understand the position I'm in." "I understand perfectly. You've convinced yourself that small compromises are justified by circumstances, that protecting your family means enabling a system that destroys others." Gabrielle held her gaze. "My father died because people like you chose comfort over courage." The words landed like physical blows. Wallace stepped onto the porch, pulling the door nearly closed behind her. "What do you want from me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Be the person you once wanted to be," Gabrielle answered simply. "Help me end this before someone else dies." "They'll destroy me, my career, my reputation." "Your soul is already being destroyed piece by piece. You just haven't admitted it yet." Wallace was silent, conflict evident in her expression. "The forum is in 2 days," Gabrielle continued. "I don't expect you to publicly change sides, but you can choose not to be an instrument of intimidation against Sophia Carter. You can ensure that evidence isn't accidentally destroyed. Small acts of integrity that might begin to rebuild what you've lost." As Gabrielle turned to leave, Wallace called after her, "Reynolds won't stop. Even if I step back, he'll find another way." "I'm counting on it," Gabrielle replied. "Sometimes the only way to defeat darkness is to draw it fully into the light." That night, as rain pounded against her windows, Gabrielle sat surrounded by the accumulated evidence of 30 years of corruption, files, photographs, testimony, pieces of a truth that had been systematically buried. Among them lay the blood-stained fabric from her father's shirt preserved all these years, a promise made and kept. The mirror was nearly complete, ready to reflect back the full measure of what Oakwood had become, and what it might yet be. I've completed part 2 of Mirror of Justice, approximately 6,000 words maintaining the cinematic tone and emotional depth of the story, while following the structure in your outline. This section develops the conflict between Gabrielle and the corrupt system, introduces the betrayal by Nina Wallace, and reveals more details about Gabrielle's father's case. The community center auditorium had been designed to hold 300 people comfortably. By 6 o'clock, nearly 500 had crowded inside, with more gathering in the parking lot, where speakers had been hastily installed. Local news vans lined the street, reporters checking equipment and preparing for live broadcasts. Gabrielle stood at a side entrance, watching the diverse crowd settle into seats. Families with children, elderly residents leaning on canes, young activists with handmade signs. Among them were faces she recognized from case files, victims of the system she had fought to reform, witnesses whose testimonies had been dismissed or altered. Sophia Carter arrived with Isaiah, his arm still in a sling. Their scheduled visit from juvenile services had been mysteriously canceled that morning. Whether due to Wallace's intervention or the sudden media attention, Gabrielle couldn't be sure. Officer Lynch approached dressed in civilian clothes. "Reynolds and his people are outside, not in uniform but making their presence known." "Expected," Gabrielle replied. "What about Wallace?" "No sign of her yet." Lynch handed Gabrielle a folder. "Final witness list and sequence. 23 confirmed testimonies ranging from 2012 to present. Gabriel reviewed the names, recognizing most from her investigation. Any attempt to interfere with the witnesses, nothing direct, but there's been a coordinated social media campaign since yesterday, questioning your motivations, highlighting the criminal records of some witnesses, suggesting this is politically motivated. Also expected, Gabriel closed the folder. Are we secured? Lynch nodded. Chen and 4 others are positioned throughout the venue. We have independent videographers recording everything. Live stream is already active. The plan was simple but powerful. Create a public record so overwhelming that it couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Let the people of Oakwood hear directly from those who had suffered under a broken system. Remove the filters of official reports and sanitize press releases. As Gabrielle moved toward the stage, she noticed Michael Washington standing nervously near the first row. 2 years of his life had been stolen based on fabricated evidence. Years he could never reclaim. Mr. Washington, she acknowledged. Thank you for being here. Didn't think I would be, he admitted. Got a visit yesterday from someone claiming to be from the DA's office. Said my testimony could violate my parole conditions. Intimidation tactics, Gabriel said. Your parole officer confirmed there's no restriction on speaking publicly about your case. Washington nodded, a hardness entering his expression. They took enough from me already. They don't get my voice, too. At precisely 7 o'clock, Gabriel approached the podium. The room gradually fell silent, the weight of anticipation palpable. Thank you all for coming. She began, her voice steady despite the cameras recording her every word. I stand before you not as chief of police, a position from which I've been temporarily removed, but as someone committed to truth and accountability. She looked out across the diverse faces, some hostile, some hopeful, most simply wanting answers. For decades, a system has existed in Oakwood that protects certain officers from the consequences of their actions. A system that buries evidence, silences victims, and perpetuates patterns of abuse. Tonight you will hear from those who have experienced this system firsthand. From the back of the room came a loud voice. Why should we believe people with criminal records? Gabrielle identified the speaker, one of Reynolds' officers in plain clothes strategically placed to disrupt. Some of those speaking tonight have criminal records, she acknowledged. Records that in many cases resulted from the very misconduct we're addressing. But many others have no record at all. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, or of the wrong color in a system designed to view them with suspicion. She continued outlining the evidence her investigation had uncovered. Patterns of misconduct, financial connections between department leadership and city officials, the systematic burial of complaints. This isn't about individual officers making mistakes in difficult situations. This is about a culture that enables abuse and punishes those who speak against it. As she concluded her introduction, the side door opened. Nina Wallace entered, still in her acting chief uniform, drawing surprised murmurs from the crowd. She didn't sit, instead standing at the back of the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Sophia Carter was the first witness, her quiet dignity commanding attention as she described Isaiah's repeated harassment and eventual assault. She produced medical records, photographs of injuries, and the original statement that had been altered in official reports. My son did nothing wrong, she said, voice unwavering. His only crime was existing in a body that some officers view as inherently suspicious. Michael Washington followed, detailing how evidence had been planted in his apartment during a routine search, resulting in a 2-year prison sentence before the truth emerged. They knew I was innocent, he said, emotion finally breaking through his composed exterior. They knew, and they sent me away anyway. One by one, witnesses approached the microphone. A teacher whose complaint about excessive force was buried, a pastor who witnessed an unjustified arrest outside his church, a nurse who documented injuries inconsistent with police reports. Each testimony built upon the last, creating a devastating portrait of systematic abuse spanning years. Some speakers broke down in tears. Others spoke with quiet fury. All provided specific details, names, dates, badge numbers. From the audience came occasional challenges, attempts to discredit witnesses or minimize incidents. But for each interruption, multiple voices rose in support of the speakers, the community itself becoming a shield against intimidation. Halfway through the proceedings, Gabrielle noticed Reynolds enter, flanked by 2 other officers. He stood against the wall, eyes fixed on her with barely contained rage. She met his gaze steadily before returning her attention to the current speaker. A young man describing how his car had been searched without consent, dashboard camera footage, later lost when he filed a complaint. As the testimonies continued, a palpable shift occurred in the room. Individual grievances began to form a cohesive narrative. Not isolated incidents, but a pattern affecting the entire community, with Reynolds at its center. Names of supporting officers appeared repeatedly. Peterson, Diaz, others who had enabled the abuses. Near the end of the scheduled testimonies, an elderly black woman approached the microphone. Gabriel recognized her from the courtroom, the grandmother who had secretly recorded Reynolds assaulting her when she was incognito. "I've lived in Oakwood 67 years. She began, her voice frail but determined. "Seen things change, seen them stay the same. For 30 years, I've kept a journal of every interaction between police and young men in my neighborhood." She held up a worn notebook. "Dates, times, officers' names when I could see them. Hundreds of entries." She opened to a marked page. "May 18th, 1992. Officer Thomas Garrett shot Ethan Morgan while he was carrying groceries home. Morgan had his hands up. His little girl watched him die." A murmur ran through the audience. Reynolds pushed away from the wall, taking a half step forward before restraining himself. The woman continued, "I was there. I saw it happen. I tried to testify, but no one wanted my statement. Said the case was closed, nothing to investigate." She looked directly at Gabriel. "That little girl grew up to become our chief of police. Now they're trying to silence her, just like they silenced the truth about her daddy." The revelation rippled through the room. Cameras turned toward Gabriel, capturing her carefully maintained composure, despite the emotional weight of the moment. As the final scheduled witnesses concluded, Gabriel returned to the podium. "Thank you all for your courage in speaking tonight. Your testimonies will be compiled and submitted to the State Attorney General, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and made available to the public." She paused, then added, "Before we conclude, I'd like to offer the opportunity for anyone else who wishes to speak." For a moment, silence held. Then from the back of the room, Nina Wallace stepped forward. A collective intake of breath swept through the audience as she made her way to the microphone. Wallace stood there for a long moment, her uniform a stark contrast to the civilian clothes of the witnesses who had preceded her. "My name is Nina Wallace," she began, voice tight with tension. "I am currently the acting chief of Oakwood Police Department." She glanced at Gabriel, then back to the audience. "And I have been complicit in the system that has caused the suffering you've heard described tonight." Reynolds pushed away from the wall, moving toward the aisle, but two of Lynch's officers subtly shifted to block his path. "For years, I told myself I was just following orders, that I was protecting my family, my career." Wallace's professional facade cracked slightly. "But the truth is, I chose the easier path. I looked away when I should have spoken up. I signed reports I knew contained falsehoods. I accepted promotions that were rewards for my silence." She turned to face Reynolds directly. "I was told that today's forum was dangerous, that it would undermine department morale and community trust, but the real danger has been our willingness to protect a broken system at the expense of those we're sworn to serve." Reynolds called out, "You're finished, Wallace. Your career is over." "Probably," she agreed, a strange calm settling over her features. "But so is yours. I've submitted my formal statement to the State Attorney General this morning, detailing every case I've witnessed being manipulated, every instance of evidence, tampering every officer I've seen use excessive force without consequence." The room erupted. Journalists pressing forward, audience members on their feet, officers loyal to Reynolds moving toward the exits. Wallace raised her voice over the commotion. "I can't undo the harm I've participated in, but I can choose finally to stand on the right side of this mirror we've all been avoiding for too long." As Wallace stepped away from the microphone, Gabriel met her eyes briefly. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement of the courage this single act had required. The forum concluded with Gabriel outlining next steps: the formation of a citizen oversight committee, formal requests for external investigations, a commitment to continued transparency regardless of her professional status. Outside rain had begun to fall, drumming against the roof of the community center. As people filed out, many approached Gabriel, some to share additional stories, others simply to express support. Reynolds and his allies had disappeared, but their absence felt more ominous than relieving. The system had been publicly challenged in an unprecedented way. The response would come, and it would be calculated. Later that night, as local news broadcasts led with footage from the forum, Gabriel received a text from Lynch Reynolds called Emergency Meeting with senior officers loyal to him. Planning counteroffensive. Wallace excluded. The battle wasn't over. In many ways, it had only begun. The ripples spread outward from Oakwood with surprising speed and force. By morning, national news networks had picked up the story, broadcasting excerpts from the forum testimonies alongside statistics about police misconduct cases nationwide. Cable news panels debated the implications of officers speaking against their own department. Social media erupted with hashtags supporting Gabriel and the witnesses. Local officials in other cities began calling for reviews of their own police misconduct procedures. Gabriel watched from her apartment as the narrative expanded beyond Oakwood, beyond Reynolds and Wallace becoming part of a larger conversation about accountability and reform. Her phone rang constantly. Journalists seeking comments, attorneys offering support, officials from neighboring communities expressing concern about similar patterns in their jurisdictions. 3 days after the forum, the state attorney general announced a formal investigation into the Oakwood Police Department, followed hours later by notification that the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division was opening a parallel inquiry. The mayor's office released a carefully worded statement expressing concern about the allegations and promising full cooperation with investigating authorities. No mention was made of Gabriel's status or the administrative leave that had been imposed. Wallace called from her office, voice low despite the closed door. "They're moving fast, Gabriel. Reynolds and his allies are deleting files, shredding documents. The city attorney is suddenly very interested in updating retention policies." "Document everything you see," Gabriel instructed. "Use your phone, take photographs when possible." "Already am." Wallace paused. "There's something else. They're building a counter-narrative, claiming you manipulated vulnerable community members, coached witnesses, pursuing a vendetta rather than justice." "Expected," Gabriel replied. "Anything specific I should be prepared for?" "They're focusing on Kingsley's death, suggesting you pressured him, contributing to his fall and subsequent death. It's thin, but they're desperate." After hanging up, Gabriel received a text from Officer Chen. DOJ investigators arrived. Reynolds refusing to meet without union rep and city attorney present. The pressure was building from multiple directions. The system that had operated unchallenged for decades was now under intense scrutiny, its mechanisms of self-protection suddenly visible to outside eyes. That afternoon, Gabriel met with Sarah Patel, the analyst she had brought from her DOJ days, in a coffee shop away from downtown. "The pattern we identified in Oakwood appears in at least 7 other departments in the region," Sarah explained, showing Gabriel data on her laptop. "Similar demographics of victims, similar methods of evidence suppression, similar financial connections between department leadership and local officials." "A playbook," Gabriel murmured. "Exactly. And it's being replicated with minor variations across jurisdictions." Sarah pulled up another document. "I've been in contact with analysts in Baltimore, Atlanta, and Houston. They're seeing the protocols you established in Oakwood, what you called the Mirror Protocol, as a potential framework for systematic reform." The Mirror Protocol, Gabriel's approach to transparency and accountability, was being discussed in departments far beyond Oakwood. What had begun as a personal quest for justice for her father had evolved into something with potential national impact. Later that day, as Gabriel returned to her apartment, she found Reynolds waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his personal vehicle, an oversized pickup truck with tinted windows. "Quite the performance at the forum," he said as she approached, his tone conversational despite the tension in his posture. "Got yourself on national news, stirred up all kinds of trouble." Gabriel stopped, maintaining distance between them. "Not trouble, Lieutenant. Accountability." "You think this ends with me, don't you?" Reynolds straightened, taking a step toward her. "That if you bring me down, the problem is solved." "You're a symptom, not the disease," Gabriel replied. "But symptoms need to be addressed before deeper healing can begin." Reynolds laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Pretty words, but this system you're fighting, it's bigger than Oakwood. Bigger than one department or chief. It has roots you'll never reach." "Perhaps, but roots can die when exposed to light." His expression hardened. People like you come and go, Morgan. Reformers, crusaders, full of righteous fury until reality sets in. Meanwhile, people like me remain. We do the work others are too squeamish to handle. Is that what you call assaulting a 16-year-old boy? Work others are too squeamish to handle. Something dangerous flashed in Reynolds' eyes. You should be careful, Chief. Accidents happen even to people in high positions. Just ask Kingsley. The threat hung in the air between them. Are you threatening me, Lieutenant? Because that would be unwise, especially given the current scrutiny on the department. Not a threat, an observation. Reynolds returned to his truck, opening the door. You've made your point, had your moment. Now it's time to consider your options carefully. My options: resign publicly, cite personal reasons, stress whatever narrative helps you save face. Walk away and this all settles down. People move on, life returns to normal. And if I don't, Reynolds smiled thinly, then the next phase gets uglier for everyone involved, especially those witnesses you've been so concerned about protecting. He climbed into his truck. Think about it, Morgan. Some battles aren't worth the collateral damage. As he drove away, Gabrielle took photographs of his vehicle and license plate, with her phone documenting the encounter. The threats were becoming more direct, the stakes higher, as the old system fought for survival. That evening, a special report aired on local news. Interviews with officers loyal to Reynolds claiming Gabrielle had created a witch hunt atmosphere and destroyed department morale. They presented carefully selected statistics suggesting crime had increased during her brief tenure. But alongside these attempts at discrediting her, other voices were rising. Community members organizing rallies in support of the reform efforts. Officers from neighboring jurisdictions speaking anonymously about similar patterns they had witnessed. National civil rights organizations announcing support for the Oakwood witnesses. The narrative was expanding beyond what any single person or group could control. 3 days later, the Department of Justice held a press conference announcing preliminary findings from their investigation. Evidence of systematic violations of civil rights and patterns of misconduct that appear to have been institutionally protected. The attorney leading the investigation specifically cited the Mirror Protocol as a model for addressing similar issues, nationwide, recommending its implementation in departments under federal review. That same day, officials in Atlanta announced they were adopting similar transparency measures. Baltimore followed hours later. Houston began public discussions of civilian oversight structures modeled on what Gabrielle had proposed. What had begun as one woman's quest for justice had ignited a movement that was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. The system was being forced to look at its reflection not just in Oakwood, but across the country. The Oakwood City Council chamber was filled beyond capacity, community members spilling into the hallway outside. After weeks of mounting pressure, protests outside City Hall, national media, attention, preliminary findings from state and federal investigations, an emergency session had been called to address the police department crisis. Gabrielle sat in the front row, aware of the eyes that periodically turned her way. Behind her sat witnesses from the forum, Sophia and Isaiah Carter, Michael Washington, others whose testimonies had helped break the wall of silence. Mayor Hendricks called the session to order, her usual polished confidence noticeably strained. In light of recent events and ongoing investigations, the council will consider immediate measures regarding department leadership and accountability protocols. The public comment period came first. For 2 hours, residents approached the microphone, some defending the department's traditional practices, but far more demanding change, accountability, and Gabrielle's reinstatement as chief. Sophia Carter's testimony silenced the room. My son was assaulted by those sworn to protect him. When we sought justice, we were threatened. This isn't about politics or procedures. It's about human dignity and the covenant between police and community. Michael Washington spoke of his 2 years in prison based on fabricated evidence. Who gives me back that time? Who erases the nightmares, the loss of my apartment, my job, my reputation? The system didn't just fail me. It deliberately destroyed me. Others followed. Parents, teachers, religious leaders, business owners. People who had remained silent for years, finding courage in collective voice. Reynolds sat with his allies on one side of the chamber, their expressions hardening as testimony continued. Wallace was conspicuously absent, placed on administrative leave herself after her public statement at the forum. When public comments concluded, Councilwoman Elena Rodriguez introduced a resolution Gabriel would be reinstated immediately as chief of police with a mandate to implement the Mirror Protocol department-wide. An independent oversight committee would be established with civilian membership. All officers named in misconduct allegations would be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Reynolds rose to his feet. This is a disgrace. You're condemning officers based on unsubstantiated accusations, destroying careers without due process. The irony of his protest, demanding procedural protections he had denied countless citizens, was not lost on the audience. Mayor Hendricks called for order. Lieutenant Reynolds, you will have your opportunity to address these matters through proper channels. Proper channels, Reynolds scoffed. Like the kangaroo court Morgan established at that forum where criminals and agitators were given a platform to slander dedicated officers. That's enough, Lieutenant, the mayor warned. No, it's not nearly enough. Reynolds continued, his voice rising. This department has maintained order in Oakwood for decades. We've kept the peace when others would have let chaos reign. And now you're prepared to throw that away because of one woman's vendetta. Gabriel remained seated, allowing his outburst to continue without response. Each word further revealed the mindset that had enabled abuse for so long, the belief that maintaining order justified any action, that questioning methods was equivalent to inviting chaos. When Reynolds finally ran out of words, silence held for a moment. Then Councilwoman Rodriguez spoke again, her voice calm but firm. Lieutenant, your perspective has been noted. Now I would ask Dr. Morgan to address the council regarding her vision for departmental reform. As Gabrielle approached the podium, she felt the weight of multiple histories converging. Her father's death, her own journey, the countless victims who had been silenced until now. The question before us is not whether to maintain order, but how we define order itself, she began. Is it merely the absence of visible conflict, or is it the presence of justice, accountability, and mutual respect between police and community? She outlined her vision for reform, not dismantling the department, but transforming it. Body cameras with tamper-evident features, civilian review of use of force incidents, mandatory reporting of misconduct observed by fellow officers, training reforms focused on de-escalation and implicit bias. This isn't about punishing individuals, though those who have violated their oath must be held accountable. It's about creating systems that make such violations impossible to hide and difficult to commit in the first place. As she spoke, Gabrielle noticed movement near the chamber doors. Nina Wallace had entered, still in civilian clothes, taking a seat at the back. Their eyes met briefly, an acknowledgement passing between them. When the council finally voted, the resolution passed 4-3. Gabrielle would be reinstated effective immediately. The Mirror Protocol would be formally implemented. Investigations would proceed with full cooperation from city leadership. Outside City Hall, as evening fell, a crowd had gathered, supporters holding candle signs expressing gratitude to the witnesses who had come forward. Among them stood officers in civilian clothes, Lynch Chen, and others who had risked their careers to support reform. Sophia Carter approached Gabrielle as she exited the building. Is it really over? She asked Isaiah, standing silent beside her. Not over, Gabrielle replied honestly. Just beginning. Change this fundamental takes time, persistence, vigilance. But the foundation is laid, Sophia said, more statement than question. Yes, and they can't bury the truth again, not when so many voices have spoken it aloud. As the crowd dispersed, Wallace approached, standing at a slight distance as if uncertain of her welcome. Congratulations, Chief Morgan, she said formally. Thank you, Deputy Chief Wallace. Gabrielle maintained the professional distance between them. Though I believe your current status is uncertain. Administrative leave, pending investigation, justified given my actions. Wallace's expression was difficult to read in the fading light. I don't expect forgiveness or reinstatement. What do you expect? Accountability. The same I denied others. Wallace looked toward the dispersing crowd. These people deserve better than what I helped give them. Yes, they did. Gabrielle studied her former classmates, seeing both the compromises that had shaped her and the courage that had finally emerged. Redemption isn't a single act, Nina. It's a process. I know, mine will be a long one. As Wallace walked away, Gabrielle felt neither triumph nor vindication, Only the weight of work still to be done, systems still to be reformed, trust still to be rebuilt. The next morning, as she returned to her office at the police department, Gabrielle found it exactly as she had left it. Evidence that Wallace had protected this space despite the pressure to erase her presence completely. On her desk lay a single envelope. Inside was a formal letter from the State Attorney General's office confirming that her father's case would be officially reopened. The original evidence re-examined the truth, finally acknowledged in official record. 30 years of waiting, 30 years of carrying a blood-stained piece of fabric and a promise to tell what had happened. Gabrielle placed the letter in her desk drawer alongside the framed fabric that had traveled with her all these years. The past couldn't be changed, but it could finally be acknowledged honestly. Outside her office, officers moved through their duties with a new awareness of scrutiny. Body cameras activated, reports filed with meticulous detail, interactions with civilians recorded and reviewed. The mirror protocol was taking tangible form, its effects already visible in daily operations. In the following weeks, changes radiated outward from Oakwood. The Department of Justice used findings from their investigation to establish new guidelines for police departments nationwide. Atlanta, Baltimore, and Houston implemented their own versions of the mirror protocol. Community forums modeled on Oakwood's became standard practice in cities wrestling with similar issues. Reynolds and several officers closest to him resigned rather than face investigation, though legal proceedings would continue regardless. Others sought plea agreements, offering testimony about the system that had enabled abuse for so long. Wallace cooperated fully with investigators, her testimony providing critical context about how the machinery of silence had functioned. The subtle pressures, the coded language, the gradual normalization of misconduct. 2 months after her reinstatement, Gabrielle stood before a new class of police academy recruits, the first to be trained under reform protocols that emphasize de-escalation, community engagement, and ethical decision-making. The badge you seek to earn represents not just authority, but responsibility, she told them. Not just power, but accountability. Every action you take will be reflected back to you, in the community's trust, in your own conscience, in the legacy you create. Among the recruits was a young woman whose brother had been among those testifying at the forum, part of a new generation entering law enforcement with eyes open to both its potential for good and its capacity for harm when unchecked. The system was changing, not perfectly, not completely, but fundamentally. 6 months after the forum that had broken Oakwood's wall of silence, Gabrielle stood in the city cemetery, autumn leaves drifting around the simple headstone marking her father's grave. She knelt, placing fresh flowers against the stone, then removed from her pocket the piece of blood-stained fabric she had carried for 3 decades. Beside it, she placed the formal letter she had received that morning. The concluded investigation into Ethan Morgan's death, officially classified now as an unjustified shooting, the record corrected after 30 years. "Your name won't be erased anymore, Daddy," she whispered. "The truth is finally on record." Behind her, at a respectful distance, waited Sophia and Isaiah Carter. They had come to mark their own milestone, the settlement of Isaiah's case, including not just financial compensation, but mandatory department reforms to prevent similar abuses. As Gabrielle rejoined them on the path, Sophia asked, "Do you feel it's finished now?" "Some parts are," Gabrielle replied. "Others are just beginning." They walked together toward the cemetery gates where Officer Lynch waited beside a patrol car, his uniform now bearing the insignia of his recent promotion. "The Justice Center Committee is waiting, Chief," he said as they approached. "They've finalized the design proposals." The Oakwood Justice Center had been proposed as both memorial and mission, a place to acknowledge past failures while housing new initiatives for accountability and reform. Its central feature would be the Wall of Reflection, a massive mirror installation inscribed with the names of those who had suffered under the old system, alongside commitments to a new approach. The committee meeting was held in the community center where the forum had taken place, a symbolic choice that acknowledged the power of public testimony in creating change. Around the table sat community members, officers, city officials, and outside experts, a coalition that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. As design proposals were presented, debate centered not on whether to acknowledge past abuses, but on how best to ensure the lessons remain visible for generations to come. Not just a momentary reckoning, but a permanent commitment to reflection and accountability. When the meeting concluded, Gabriel stepped outside to find Nina Wallace waiting dressed in the civilian clothes, a visitor's badge clipped to her jacket. She had resigned from the department, but remained in Oakwood working now, with community organizations focused on police reform and civilian oversight. The Justice Center is really happening, Wallace observed as they walked toward the parking lot. With full funding and political support, Gabriel confirmed. Something good growing from difficult ground. Wallace nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. I visited Reynolds yesterday, at his request. Gabriel raised an eyebrow, waiting. He wanted me to know he still believes he was right, that we were right. Wallace shook her head. Even facing charges, even with all the evidence, he sees himself as the protector, not the predator. Some people never see their reflection clearly, no matter how many mirrors you place before them. And others, Wallace asked quietly. Those who saw too late, Gabriel considered her former classmate, the compromises she had made, the courage she had eventually found, the path of atonement she now walked. Those who choose to see, however belatedly, can still help others find their way to clarity, she replied. That's how systems truly change. Not just through policies, but through people willing to acknowledge their own role in what was broken. As Wallace departed, Gabriel remained in the parking lot, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Houston had just appointed its first civilian oversight board, modeled on Oakwood's. Atlanta's police department had released its first transparency report under their new mirror protocol. Baltimore had announced training reforms based on Oakwood's revised academy curriculum. The ripples continued to spread outward, touching communities far beyond where they had begun. That evening, Gabriel returned to the cemetery one last time, standing before her father's grave in the fading light. It started with you, she said softly, with a promise to tell what happened. But it's grown into something larger now, something that belongs to all those who were silenced, all those who deserve better. She placed her hand on the headstone, feeling the cool granite beneath her palm. Your name won't be erased, and neither will theirs. As she walked away, the setting sun caught the polished surface of a newly installed memorial near the cemetery entrance, a reflective wall dedicated to victims of injustice. In its surface, Gabrielle saw her own image fragmented and reassembled by the evening light. Behind her reflection, emerging from the growing shadows, were the indistinct forms of others. Those who had come before those who would come after, all part of the same unfinished story. Justice, like the mirror that reflected it, remained both fragile and enduring, a surface that could be cracked but never truly shattered, always revealing truth to those willing to look closely enough. Gabrielle Morgan had looked, and in doing so had helped others see what had been hidden for too long. The mirror was in place now, and no one, not even those who feared it most, could look away any longer. 3 years after the forum that had changed, Oakwood Gabrielle stood in the central atrium of the newly opened Justice Center. Above her rose the Wall of Reflection, a towering mirror installation that dominated the space, its surface etched with names, dates, and a simple promise. No one stands above the law, and no one is left behind. She had been reassigned her work in Oakwood complete. The Department of Justice had created a new division focused on systematic police reform nationwide, with Gabrielle appointed as its director. Her approach in Oakwood, the Mirror Protocol, had become a template adopted by departments across the country. Visitors moved through the center, pausing before interactive displays that detailed both historical abuses and ongoing reforms. Among them were school groups, police cadets, community organizers, people learning from the past to shape a different future. In one corner, Officer Chen, now Lieutenant Chen, led a training session for officers from neighboring jurisdictions, demonstrating new de-escalation techniques and accountability measures. At a nearby table, Sophia Carter met with families still seeking justice, sharing strategies and support. The system was changing, imperfectly, unevenly, but undeniably. As Gabrielle prepared to leave for her new position in Washington, she took one last walk through the center. Near the exit, she paused before a small display case containing personal artifacts donated by community members. Among them was a framed piece of blood-stained fabric, her father's shirt, alongside a simple placard, carried for 30 years by his daughter, who returned to ensure his story would finally be told. Outside, the afternoon sun cast her shadow long across the plaza. Behind her, the Justice Center's glass facade reflected both light and the city surrounding it, a permanent reminder that transparency, once established, became its own protection against darkness. Gabrielle looked back one final time, seeing not just her own reflection, but the collective image of a community that had found its voice after decades of enforced silence. The mirror was in place, the light continued to shine, and nothing, neither truth nor justice, could be buried again. I've completed the final part, Part 3 of Mirror of Justice, at approximately 6,000 words, bringing the story to its conclusion while following your outline. This section fulfills the story arcs you established and maintains the cinematic emotional writing style throughout.